So today I have the great pleasure to be surrounded by two amazing ladies from the finance world, Olivia Bowen and Becky O'Connor. And so I will maybe leave you, Olivia and Becky, to introduce yourselves to the amazing people who have joined today. Olivia, do you want to start?
Sure. So hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, I'm a financial advisor, which is also called financial planning at Castlefield, and we're an employee-owned business, which is very rare in financial services. And we've also always specialised in responsible or ethical investing, which we'll talk more about later. And I wanted to just tell you briefly how I got into financial services. So I wanted to work for an ethical company. That was my main goal when I left university. And I found a small ethical financial advice firm. It was called Gaia at the time. And then when I was there, I thought, well, this is very interesting because it's dealing with mortgages and investments and pensions. And I realized I didn't really know how most of those things work. So I thought, well, even if it doesn't turn into a career, I'm going to do the exams anyway. And so while I was doing the exams, I thankfully found it very interesting and became a financial advisor about 3 years later.
I will leave your video.
Some background.
Yeah, so I've been on this journey myself, as in, I need to know more about this. It will be useful for my own life. So hopefully we can help you with that today.
Right, thanks, Olivia. Becky, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Becky O'Connor. I'm head of pensions and savings for Interactive Investor. I've actually only been there since October last year. It's a large investment platform where you can self-invest your own pension, but it also offers ISAs and that kind of thing. I co-founded a website called goodwithmoney.com back in 2015 with my co-founder Lisa. And we felt that with the growth of ethical investing, although back in 2015 it was still pretty niche, it really has become a lot less niche in the last couple of years. But we felt that there needed to be a way that people could find out more information without already being investors and without already knowing lots about the world of ethical investment. And we wanted to make it as basic and accessible as possible, and also to provide inspiration and motivation for people just starting out on their investment journeys. It's not a website for women, although our social media handles are Good Money Girl, but we have found over time that there's been a lot of interest from women, and pretty early on we established that half of our audience was women, and that was quite unusual for a website that was all about finance and investing. Usually it's kind of 75% men, 25% women, a sort of industry standard gender split and audience numbers. So we were really pleased with that, and we felt that was something to build on. And we'll talk about why impact is so appealing to women in this presentation, but I'm delighted to be part of this today. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Becky. And just a few more words on myself. So I'm the founder and CEO of the C Collective, which is an agency on a mission to help sustainable solutions and innovations to scale faster thanks to outstanding user experiences. And so we have our consultancy services as well as our events such as the Hackathon. So let's start. If I can get to the next slide. Oops, so sometimes my laptop does get a bit stuck. Oops. All right, so sorry about that. I'm going to stop sharing and move to the next slide manually. So in terms of interaction, we want this session to be as interactive as possible. So feel free to put down your question using the chat as we speak. If ever one of us is talking with jargon that you don't understand, do let us know, and we'll stop and explain. Okay, we're trying to avoid the jargon, but you never know. So use the Zoom chat for your questions while we speak, and then at the end we'll have a Q&A session as well. Okay. So I think we've talked about that, but really the reason we're here today is that overall women have less opportunity to own their money and to become wealthy than men. And this is why we're here today. This is why we want to do something about it. And if we, just like Becky was saying, if we look at the stats, recently there was a YouGov poll that found out that about 50% of women have never held any investment product. And for men, the figure is 37% only. So this is what we call the investment gap. And the problem is that it only adds to the gender pay gap that we have. And so to a point that at the end of your career as a woman, or when you retire, the saving pot and the retirement pot are usually 3 times lower than that of men. So this is one of the big consequences that we're trying to address. And we're not even talking about the impact, the very serious impact of COVID on women's financial situation and overall place in society. But having said that, we know that women are totally capable of investing, and we want to find ways to deal with that, starting by doing things like today and informing women. So in terms of the trends that we see, so we know that women tend to prioritize cash over investment. We know that overall women feel like finance is kind of another world where they don't really belong. And I think a good summary is that it's been designed by men for men, and women just struggle to engage with it and find it inspiring. And also what we found during our research is that a lot of women we spoke to, even if they are already investing and they know things, they tend to underestimate their capacity to manage their money and invest as well. So we want to work on that as well. All right. So next slide, I have to find a bit of a workaround, but my laptop is not really helping today. And here we go, back to the next slide. So the other aspect that we want to address through our hackathon is the what we call the impact finance gap, the fact that there are amazing solutions out there to help with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, but to get them to emerge and to scale, we need a lot of money. We need a lot of investment, so about 2.5 trillion a year. And so we want, because we know that women are more likely to invest in a way that's aligned with their values and which has a positive social and environmental impact. We also want to encourage women to invest towards this kind of positive social and environmental impact investment solutions, basically. Over to you, Becky.
Thank you very much. So why is there an investment gap for women? Well, it's not your fault if you're a woman and you feel like you're not engaged with investment yet. It's partly just the way we've been marketed to throughout our entire lives. And that is something, marketing is something that we receive mostly subconsciously. So you may not even really be aware that sort of social conditioning has happened to you. But over the years, from when you're a small child and you're growing up, women are encouraged to spend money, and they typically the way households divide their money, if there's a man and a woman in a household, it tends to be that the man takes control of the longer term investments and savings, and the woman is responsible for the day-to-day budgeting and daily small spending. Now, whether or not, you know, there's a fundamental biological thing going on there is kind of beside the point. I don't think there is, by the way. I just think that's partly to do with this conditioning that has happened. We need to change it. So, you know, women are kind of marketed to. We need to be aware that we're marketed to as the spenders. So the clothes, the food, all the sort of shiny stuff that you see on Instagram, that's all designed to get us spending. Less of the marketing budget for the investment industry has been spent on appealing to women. The investment industry has always seen that its target audience is men, and that's just kind of, you know, that's been the accepted view. That is starting to change. They're realizing that women do have you know, more investing power now, and so the investment industry in general is trying to appeal to women. So you'll see that, and you'll probably notice it now I've said it, that the ads for asset managers are becoming not pink, because it's not about pinkifying everything to make it appealing to women, but will be more about the stories and about the people, and about where the money is going, because that appeals more to women. Next slide, please. So women need to invest more than men. We can interrogate that a little bit. Why do women need to invest more than men? Well, you may have heard somebody come up with the phrase F off funds. I won't swear now, just in case anyone's feeling a little delicate today. And that was to do with, you know, the risk of divorce and separation and being reliant on a partner for income and the need to be able to survive if that relationship falls apart. But there's more to this need for women to invest than simply the risk of losing a partner's income or investments through a relationship breakdown. Recently, obviously, we've had this idea of pandemic pots, and that's the pandemic has highlighted the need for financial resilience. It's also enabled people to build up savings through not having the usual spending, and so that's meant that some women who have built up some savings pots now have more choice, and they're thinking about what to do to build this long-term financial buffer, and that includes investment choices potentially. Why do women need to invest more than men? Women from the very beginning of their careers, according to ONS average pay figures, earn less. So there's talking about the gender pay gap, lots of people assume that women's earnings go down at the point that they have children, if they have children, but it's actually from the very beginning of their careers. So they're earning less. It's partly because of an expectation of employers that women will leave the workforce at some point, and that's kind of why from the very beginning they don't earn as much. But because they don't earn as much, and pension contributions in the workplace are a percentage of your pay, they also have smaller pensions. So Scottish Widows put out some brilliant research earlier this week for International Women's Day, which identified a £100,000 pension gap between men and women. I did my own research on this actually, and came up with similar numbers, but women would have to work until full time, they would have to work until they were 80 to get the same investment retirement pot that a man would have by state pension retirement age, which is crazy. And it's because women tend to take more time out of the workplace when they have children. It's very difficult to balance the needs of a family logistically and financially and stay in full-time employment, but also caring for older relatives later in life, and the possibility of illness and other things getting in the way, life getting in the way of work, seems to happen to women a lot more than it does to men. And this is why women have less capacity to invest, but it's also, unfortunately, why they need to think about it more too. Next slide, please. I hesitate to make all of this about you and the things you need to do, because I think there are some really big structural things that get in the way for women. But what we're talking about today is what you can do as an individual. So leaving aside the fact that I think we need, you know, some serious government policy intervention on the pension gap and the pay gap, there are some things that you can do for yourself in the meantime, assuming that none of the good policy stuff that we need ever happens. So there may be some things similar to what I was saying actually on social conditioning for marketing, that you believe about yourself and your ability to invest, that you need to kind of put to one side. And so we've on this slide, there are some psychological barriers that are quite common among women that get in the way of them investing more and taking control of their own finances. And the first is that women are not good at maths. I went to an all-girls school and I did an English literature degree, and I've always believed that I'm not good at maths. I just, you know, I think my family background, my parents said, oh, you know, women and men's brains are different. Men are good at maths and science, and women are good at English and languages and all of that stuff. And I believed it because that's, you know, what parents and teachers were telling me. But actually, you know, I work in the financial services industry and I can do the maths. And so I needed to kind of unravel a lot of the beliefs I had about my own fundamental ability to do maths in order to succeed in my career, which is a fairly big incentive to do so. But I did, and it, you know, it might be that I don't like maths as much as I like reading books, but I can do it. So you don't need to be amazing at maths to understand the basics of investment. You don't need to understand finance, you just need to be open to learning about it. And I think impact investing is one way to kind of find some motivation to learn about it, that is beyond doing something for yourself. It's about learning how the investment industry works. And the thing that really turned me on to investing was this idea that it's really just a way of engaging with the world around you, and trends and themes and progress, social and economic, in different countries. And it's a way into those discussions, and it's a way to make all of that stuff that's happening in the world personal to you because you're invested in it. Number 3, I don't have enough money. Well, that really may be true. And, you know, if you've got lots of debt and, you know, you're struggling financially, you may not have enough money to invest, but you might have enough money one day, and it's something that you can keep under constant review. The barriers to investing are now much lower than they used to be. You can invest for just £1 a month on some platforms, although, you know, to see a meaningful difference from your investing, you want to put in as much as you can spare. And it's the spare cash that is important, because if you need that money for something else, then you probably shouldn't be investing it, and that includes debt repayment. Again, thinking about the division of labour if you're married or if you have a partner, thinking about you know, leaving it all to your husband. That can sometimes seem like the easiest thing to do. When I was working at Royal London, I did some research on this division of household financial chores, and we found that 40% of men say they mostly take sole charge of the long-term financial planning, compared to 33% of women. So there's a financial planning gap there as well, if you like, that needs to be addressed. And that's it sort of strays into relationship management territory sometimes, but you can sort of just talk about it more, and take part in those conversations rather than delegating that solely to your husband or partner. And yes, no spare money, I have too much debt. You might, and that is one area that would need attention first before you start investing. It does depend on the type of debt though, if it's a mortgage or if it's a student loan, or if it's incredibly low cost interest-free credit for a sofa. That doesn't necessarily mean you can't think about investing yet, but you need to look carefully at your monthly budget and where it's being allocated, and as I mentioned, just keep it under review for when you do have the spare cash to start thinking about investing.
Great, and then we're going to ask you, aren't we, with the next slide, what savings or investments do you have? If you could type in the chat, we'd love to know. Starting to come through.
ISA, cash ISA, premium bonds, mortgage, overpayment.
Mortgage overpayment, very good. Yes, in a sense, that's could see that as investing in your home.
Current accounts with cash, additional.
Cash and property are coming up a fair bit. Lots of premium bonds.
Savings, capital in bank.
Anyone one big on premium bonds?
Yeah.
No.
Few premium bonds. Crypto. Well, question, what is premium bonds? So I think we will cover that, definitely.
Oh yes, I can. I've got a bond section coming up, so I'll make sure I mention premium bonds.
Somebody's asking, what is crypto? Maybe we can park that one as well for the jargon buster bit.
Okay, I'll make a note.
Ooh, okay. Stock, yeah, we'll talk about stock as well.
What's really interesting about this, these answers, is that nobody's mentioned pensions, I don't think. So it may be that you don't have a pension, but most people, if they're employed, will have an auto-enrolment scheme. So you are investing via your pension. So probably what's happened is you're going into the default fund that's provided by your pension provider and your employer. But it may be that you would like to change that. It's probably not an ethical fund, but there should be an ethical fund available, one would hope, not in every case. And did you, oh, this is a good point. Should we go? Yes, great. There we are. So we're on that slide 12. Okay. And Good with Money, I believe, Becky, have got a good guide to pensions on the site.
Yeah, we have. It's worth looking at if you want to find out a bit more about where your workplace pension is invested.
And another tip as well is that you may not be aware, but your parents or grandparents can pay into pension for you. So the pension would be in your name, and you can have two pensions running concurrently. So you don't just have, it's not like you can only have one. So you could have your own personal pension alongside a work pension. And if your parents wanted to, or your grandparents, they could pay in for it for you, up to £3,600 a year. And your pension gets the tax relief from that. And I've actually already set up pensions for my children. So they're aged 12 and 10. And you can put a minimum of £20 a month in. It gets 20% tax relief. So £25 is invested for you, although it only costs you £20 a month. And it's going to be invested for 40 years or so, because they're so young, 50 years, 60 years, who knows? So I'm getting them off to a good start. So that's a useful tip that you may not be aware of. And also there's an organisation called Share Action, which helps people lobby pension companies. So do have a look at their website from an ethical perspective, because if you're not happy that your workplace pension is doing enough on the ethical side, Share Action have got resources to help you engage with work about that. Okay, so how to get your finances in order. I've got 10 top tips for you. So the first one is rainy day money. Yes, and Becky's already touched on this. So really the first thing you should do is have money in the bank. So that could be, when we talk about deposit accounts, we're talking about bank or building society accounts, and there's no investment risk, but equally they're not going to grow, and inflation will be eroding their value over time. So you don't want too much in the bank. I sometimes have new clients come to us where all they've got is cash savings, and the money's been sitting there for sort of 20 years. And you're like, oh, if only you'd invested it, it could have doubled in size, you know? But that is definitely the first building block. You know, if you lost your job or you had to replace your car or whatever it is, you do need ready money. The general rule is to have 6 months expenditure. But if you feel very confident of your job, maybe you don't feel you need that much. Then number 2, analyze your spending habits. So this is really about checking what you spend. So we have a spreadsheet that we share with clients with different categories. So the mortgage or rent, you know, what their pension contributions are, how much they tend to spend on food. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's really, really useful exercise just to go through and see what are your spending habits, and is there anywhere that you could save money. So if you buy a coffee every day out and about, do you really need to? If you invested that instead, it could be quite a lot of money over the month. It will help you plan for the future as well, because you can compare then your income with your expenditure and just get a sense of whether there's a surplus or a deficit. And it'll help you decide, will engage better with how you're spending your money and give you some sense of control. And you can do it on a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be a spreadsheet, of course. So the next thing you should consider is your protecting your income or protecting your family. So if you have any debts, mortgage, card, you know, credit cards or whatever, and you have people who you don't, people who are reliant upon you, or who you'd like to leave a large sum to, you know, the full value of your property, for example, on death, then you should take out life cover to cover your mortgage or other debts. It's very, very cheap because you're very unlikely to die before retirement, thankfully. Income protection is more expensive because this protects your income if you're ill and unable to work, or if you have an accident. It's designed to be long-term, but the amount of people with back problems that stops them working, or mental health problems, and the trick is to take out the policy before you have any such problems, because if you've got a pre-existing condition, it won't be covered normally. So income protection is more expensive, but you're much more likely to use it. And that means that you are protected from illness, your income, and therefore your long-term saving plans. Number 4, become a habitual saver. So, of course, it's not always easy. There may well be financial demands on you. But if you find a way to save, even if it's just £10 a month, then and apply that discipline, you will not regret it. It will make you feel empowered. We do say to people, ideally save between 10 and 15% of your earnings throughout your lifetime, but that's not always possible. But that's a goal to go for. And when I first started, I was working as an administrator at Gaia, the company I told you about, and I really didn't have spare money. But because of working in financial advisors, I thought, right, now I need to have a savings plan of my own. So I took out a £10 a month friendly society plan, and that's a 10-year savings plan. And then the proceeds are tax-free at the end. So I put away £10 a month for 10 years. And then I got a lump sum of about 1,500 quid after 10 years. And of course, I barely noticed the £10 going in. And it was just lovely to have a lump sum, you know, without even realizing I've been saving towards it. So there's always something you can do. And then in terms of setting goals, if you're able to compartmentalize your money, this adds a sort of additional layer of sophistication, if you like, to your financial planning. So saving into pension isn't, and for retirement is the key one. And that's what most of us are saving towards once we've got the mortgage, etc. But there may be other goals too. So you might want to retire early and plan to pay off your mortgage at the same time. So you might need to be overpaying on your mortgage, as someone who's joined us today is already doing. And then in terms of tax planning, so of course we should pay tax, it's our civic duty, but there are tax allowances such as ISAs and tax rebates that you get through investing in pensions. So you should be making the most of those where you can. And if you're self-employed, do put money aside for the likely tax that you're due to pay. So I used to be self-employed, I was a basic rate taxpayer. And I realised quite early on that saving 20%, which is the income tax, was not enough, because there was all the national insurance as well, which added up to about another 10%. So I always saved 30% of my earnings into a tax fund. And it is quite easy for self-employed people to just spend what they earn and then suddenly have a tax bill that they can't afford to pay. So don't fall into that trap. Risk consideration. So of course we think about investment risk, don't we? And you may be familiar with the sense that if you invest in higher risk assets, then you're more likely to get a better return. And that is true. And that works if you're investing for the long term, so 10 years plus. But really, when you're thinking about how much risk can I take, you need to think about whether you can afford to take the risk and also timescales. So just think, right, I'm going to put this money away. If when I need that money, it's lost value, is that going to be a real problem for me? Or can I just leave it until it grows again? If it's going to be a real problem for you financially, you need to lower the risk that you were going to undertake with that pot. If it's, oh, well, I can let it ride out, or I'm going to be investing for so long it will make money, because you can be sure of that over the long term, then by all means go for a higher risk investment. In terms of, that's investment risk, but there's also inflation risk, which I touched on before. So if you feel very cautious and you're keeping all your money in the bank or building society on deposit, then effectively the cost of living is going up each year by more than the interest that you'll be getting on that money. So what you can buy with that money each year is reducing, and that is a real risk. So try and divvy up your money into different pots so that you do have some investment risk, but also return. I've noted about thinking of others. So this is about investing thoughtfully, thinking about the impact that your money is having in the world. You know, that you probably don't want to profit on the back of other people's misery, which happens, of course, and it's much more likely to happen if you're not investing in ethical companies that have been ethically screened in some sort of way. And also, if you have got some spare money, you might want to consider charitable donations, either on a monthly basis or ad hoc, or even just leaving some money to charities in your will. And there are many very tax efficient ways to do this. In terms of research, well, so much information is now online. Of course, Good With Money is a fantastic resource. As a financial advisor, I use it myself. You can, well, we talked about the pension report. There are lots of other sorts of reports. You can look at the government's money advice service that gives free advice and all sorts of guides on borrowing, budgeting, pensions, and do educate yourself a little. And it's not as complicated as it might seem at first. And then I've put seek advice because you might decide that you need financial advice. This is usually a good idea if you're undertaking some sort of life event, such as you are buying a home, or you're taking out any sort of mortgage. You may be starting a family, you might receive an inheritance, you might have got some money in different pensions and you're just thinking, no, I need a plan, I need to know I'm going to have enough when I come to retire. And it might be that you just seek advice on a one-off basis. So many of our clients, we undertake an annual review with them, but you don't have to sign up for that. You can just have one-off advice just to check that you're on track. Okay, that's it for that slide.
Sorry, there's sometimes a bit of a delay in the slide share.
It's all right.
But we're going back to the key savings options.
Yes, so these are, we're just trying to explain what some of the terminology is. So I've already said that the cash savings are also called deposit accounts. So if somebody says something's on deposit, it just means it's with the bank or building society. And then if we think about ISAs, so what ISAs and pensions are effectively tax wrappers that go around something else. You can get a cash ISA, which is the ISA goes around your bank or building society account, or you have an investment ISA, also called stocks and shares ISA. And that is just the tax wrapper that goes around investment funds, much like the pension. All a pension is really is the tax regulation structure that goes around whatever you might hold in it. So you might have a cash fund in your pension if you're very, very low risk. You might have pure stock market funds if you're high risk. So I'll talk a bit more about pensions in a minute, about different sorts of pensions. So with ISAs, you also have the lifetime ISA. So these are for people aged 18 to 39, and you can use them to save up for a deposit for your first home, or you can use it for retirement planning, so you can access it once you reach age 60. And the government will give you a bonus. So if you can save personally up to £4,000 a year, and then the government will give you a cash bonus of £1,000 if you save 4,000. So it's basically a 20% bonus on top, 25% bonus on top from the government, because they're trying to help people get on the property ladder or save for retirement. So ISAs, what does that mean? It basically means that any money that's held in a fund will be free from income tax and capital gains tax, whether you take money out as an income or lump sum eventually. Then pensions, well, there are all sorts of different pensions, but one thing that I get asked quite a lot is, what is a defined benefit scheme versus defined contribution? So a defined benefit scheme is only available through work. So some companies, some large organisations will offer this, such as the University Superannuation Scheme or the NHS scheme. And they all used to be final salary schemes, but now they've introduced career average. So what does that mean? Well, the clue's in the name. The benefit is defined. So what they say is, okay, well, if you, on a final salary scheme, you will be paid a proportion of your final salary. Or on a career average scheme, you will be paid a proportion in retirement of the average of what you've earned over your career. And the risk to provide that benefit is held by the employer. So there's no member risk. So they're very valuable schemes. Defined contribution are more common. That's where you have a personal pension plan that may be part of a group arrangement at work. It will be, most auto enrolment schemes will be defined contribution. If you're self-employed and you've set up a personal pension plan, it will be defined contribution. And what that means is you can define how much you pay in, but you don't know how much you're going to get out, because it depends on investment performance and charges and when you take the benefits, etc. So the risk is on you, in a sense, as the member, particularly when it comes to investment risk. Any questions on those specifically? Have a quick look at the chat.
Yeah, there's a question on is there a limit in the government top in
Yes,
the lifetime?
£1,000 a year maximum. Yeah, cash ISAs, very poor interest rate. They just reflect other interest rates. When interest rates are low, cash ISAs will be very low. It used to be that cash ISAs would often have a slightly higher interest rate, but actually, whenever I look at them, I often find that there are better rates if you're not holding the money in cash ISAs. So you might just want to chase the best interest rate rather than just putting it in an ISA, because most of us, well, have a personal savings allowance as well. So that means if you're a basic rate taxpayer, which means your earnings are less than £50,000 a year, you can earn £1,000 a year in interest, whether that's from fixed interest, which I'll talk about in a minute, or cash interest, without paying any tax. So even if you haven't got money in ISAs, you're not going to be paying tax, most of us, on cash savings. If you're a high rate taxpayer, then that personal savings allowance reduces to £500. How do you find the best interest rate? There are lots of comparison sites. Do you know, are there any that you would suggest? I mean, there's Go Compare, isn't there? And Money Saving Expert.
There's one great one that's just focused on savings called Savings Champion, which is worth a look because it breaks down the different types of account really well. So instant access versus fixed term accounts where you have to keep your money locked away. So and you get a higher interest rate the longer you can lock your money away for. So a 5-year bond would pay more interest than an easy access account. I mean, bear in mind that at the moment interest rates are rock bottom, and you know, as Olivia said, inflation is a risk. So it can feel a bit pointless because you're looking at 0.15% versus 0.25%, and you're just thinking, gosh, is there any point?
Yeah.
But there is still a point because, you know, it's good to have that money out of your current account for one thing and earmarked for another purpose. But yeah, Savings Champion would be my go-to for savings related comparisons.
Excellent. Okay. Someone had a question about pensions overseas. It doesn't always have to be difficult to access your UK pensions if you leave, but it does possibly depend which country you go to. So I know people who've retired to France and they've got a UK pension, absolutely fine, but they've kept a UK bank account. So if you are a British citizen or lived here for many, many years and you have assets in this country, and I guess this applies if you've got money in the States as well, keep a bank account if you possibly can, because then the income can be paid to that bank account, and then you can decide, depending on currency, what's going on with currency wise, whether you draw it or not. So it could be that they haven't kept a bank account in the UK, which might cause problems. I don't know. But with Europe, it tends to be fine. Lots and lots of people retire overseas and they're not disenfranchised from their pensions necessarily. Oh, small lump sum would where would be the best place to put it now? Oh, I don't know. It really just depends on whether you want instant access or not, and the rates change every day. So you have to go onto one of those websites and have a look. And of course, you should be prioritising ideally an ethical bank or building society, maybe a mutual like Nationwide or one of the ethical specialists. But let me just go back to talking about, so I was talking about pensions, and another good resource is PensionWise, which is pension guidance for the government for the over 50s. So if you are over the age of 50 and you've got any sort of pension questions, try PensionWise because it's a free service. They're not offering advice, they're offering guidance, which isn't the same thing, but it might be useful for some of you. Right, so just go back to fixed interest. And now I'm talking about different asset classes that you might have within an investment. So we've all heard of the stock market or shares or equities. That's basically where you, through a fund, own a share of a company. And if it does well, you will have your proportionate share of that profit. And if it falls in value, you will proportionately lose a bit of money as well. When you invest in funds, you're investing in, or the fund manager is investing in 60 to 100 different companies on your behalf. So it's very well diversified. So even if one goes to the wall, it won't be like you lose all your money, you know, because you are well diversified. Fixed interest is a different way to invest in companies. You aren't buying shares in the company is issuing debt. So for example, if Marks and Spencer's wants to raise £5 million, they can either issue shares to the market, or they can go to the fixed interest or corporate bond market, also known as, means the same thing pretty much. And they'll go to the bond market and say, look, we want to raise £5 million and we're willing to pay, if you lend us money, we'll pay you back 5% a year for 10 years. And if the market thinks, yeah, I think that's a good rate of interest for a company like Marks and Spencer's, who aren't too risky, but equally might suffer some headwinds in a global, economic crisis. So they'll assess that, and if they think it's fair, then they will buy at 5%, and they'll loan Marks and Spencer's that money. Now, if you have a corporate bond fund, you are investing in those loans. Again, very well diversified. Your fund would have 60 different companies' loans in there, and a fund manager is deciding which ones to buy and sell. And then in terms of bonds, we've touched on this already. Bonds mean so many different things in financial services. And at the beginning of my career, I used to find it so confusing because I thought, oh, I know what a bond is. And I'd be like, no, there's a different one over here. And it's a completely different beast. So just to make you aware of that, premium bonds are effectively cash savings. You can get your money out at any time. They're offered by National Savings and Investments, which is underwritten by the government. But it's a form of lottery. So for each premium bond you buy, you're entered in a monthly draw, and somebody will win big, and a few people will get £25 or so. And so it's a form of very gentle lottery, but your money your money will not earn any interest. So if you don't win any of the prizes, then you are not earning anything on your money. So although it's rather nice to occasionally get a bit of money, the returns, if the average return on premium bonds is extremely low. So again, I've often had clients come to me with quite a lot in premium bonds, and I've been saying, really, unless you need that money in cash anyway, you should be doing something more interesting with it and allowing it to grow. I've touched on corporate bonds, which is those beasts, company loans, a way of investing in companies through loans rather than shares. If banks and building societies are offering bonds, they tend to be fixed term accounts. So a 1-year bond, a 2-year bond, a 3-year bond, they will typically have a fixed rate of interest, and you can only invest in a lump sum rather than monthly. And then you've got investment bonds, and you probably won't come across these unless you've got a financial advisor in place, but you can buy them direct, I guess. And this is where you will invest a lump sum of money, normally at least £10,000, possibly more, and it will be invested in a collection of different investments. It's taxed in a specific way. You can effectively take an income which is deemed to be return of capital, so there's no tax on it, but there are limits to that. You can assign the bond to adult children in the future if you want to, so they're quite useful for estate planning, for moving money from somebody who might be a high rate taxpayer to a basic or non-rate taxpayer. So you might come across those as well. And then managed fund, I just thought this might be useful, particularly in line with pensions. You'll normally find that your default scheme on a pension is a managed fund, and that basically means that it's got a collection of all these different asset classes within it. So it'll have some stock market, it'll have some fixed interest, it might have some commercial property in there, and the fund manager is managing that asset allocation to make sure it's always in line with whatever the fund mandate will be, which will probably be some sort of medium risk. And that's managed for you. So rather than you going, oh, well, I want a stock market fund, and then I'll have a bit of property, and then I'll have a fixed interest fund, and you sort of managing that collection yourself. If you go for a managed fund, you're getting a diverse range that's being managed for you, and it won't the investment risk profile won't drift over time. So they're quite useful. Okay. And cryptocurrency we wanted to cover, didn't we? So this is basically investing or buying they're sort of magical things, really. Financial advisors generally don't go near them with a barge pole. So you can make a lot of money if you got in early, potentially, but it's a sort of digital currency that doesn't belong to any country. And you can make money betting on what currency is going to do. There are many investment vehicles that are making judgments about how currencies playing out around the world and trying to make money out of it. We don't do that at our firm. You know, it's very specialist. I would proceed with great caution and only invest money, even if you can work out how to do it, even that isn't very easy. Only invest money that you can afford to lose, because it's likely to be very high stakes, and a lot of the funds aren't regulated, or the structures by which you invest aren't regulated. It's kind of the Wild West almost of investing. And that's why some people have done very well, like the gold rush, but many people will not. And you could be one of them. If some people are lucky enough to get rich, it's, by chance, getting in early on something, buying Apple shares, 30 years ago. Don't bank on it. Most of us won't. Even professionals don't know how to make those sorts of judgment calls normally. Really, the way you will look after yourselves long term is by steadily saving as much as you can each month. That's the really clever thing to do. If something is offering very high returns, it's not likely to occur, really. So proceed with caution. Okay.
Olivia, we're going to skip the following slide because we're short with time, and
we are absolutely lovely. Okay,
go to the impact investment section with Becky.
Okay, cool. I'll rattle through this last bit because it's really close to lunchtime. But we've been talking about risk. We've been talking about reasons to invest. It's because you want to make some money, and you want to do so while managing your risk so that you don't lose money. To Olivia's point on crypto, and in general, in the last year, we've seen some quite high investment returns. And there's been quite a lot of talk of maybe that that looking a little bit frothy at the moment. The market's looking like they've seen a lot of growth. Are we able to continue with that level of growth? Obviously, Bitcoin went totally bonkers, and that spurred lots of interest. There was a big rush on a stock called GameStop that you might have heard of in January this year, and a lot of people rushed in, put some money in, made quite a bit of money, but then equally a lot of people are now holding on to shares that have lost them money, and they're trying to make that back. I think it's really interesting that crypto was mentioned, and premium bonds and property, because it just goes to show what we all think of when we hear the word investment. And premium bonds is something we tend to get from our parents and our grandparents, and crypto is something that we hear about all the time on social media. So there's tons of influences there. Anyway, investing, it should make you some money. It should do so minimizing risk. These are the two ways we've typically thought about investment, as profit and risk, but actually impact is this third dimension to reasons to invest. And also, what our money is doing. It's not just benefiting us personally, it is also having wider benefits for the world. The little Venn diagram that you see here is just my very visual way of illustrating that. You have to hold on to the personal reasons for investing. There's no point just focusing on the positive impact. That's charity. This is investment, and it's about you looking after your future and the future of the world together at the same time. It is possible to have your cake and to eat it too, but that doesn't mean that all positive impact investments will generate higher financial returns and profit all year round, every year for the rest of our lives. That's not the way the markets work. There's ups and downs, even with impact investing. This is not a panacea, but it will also give you a feel-good factor that you won't necessarily get if you're investing in oil and commodities and things that have a damaging impact on the environment. And you want to have a planet to live on when you retire. There's no point having a massive pension pot if you can't swim in the sea. That's my view anyway. So the positive impact gives us this brilliant way of combining life goals and assuaging our guilt about our own impact on the world. So just if we could go to the next slide. looking at the different types of positive impact, there's absolutely tons. It's almost like it's designed to confuse us. But I would want to steer you in the direction of the bottom half of this slide, actually, because ESG and CSR and all the stuff at the top is kind of a bit bog standard now. Everybody is doing ESG. All the investment managers have something to say on ESG and how they do ESG. Ethical is still slightly different. It's negatively screened investment style, so it screens out all the bad stuff, but also, you increasingly come to assume that your money is no longer going into arms, for instance. Alcohol, that's still, the jury is out on the ethical dimension of investing in alcohol companies.
Most of our clients are fine with that.
Yes.
That was because of religious groups starting off ethical investing in the UK. That's where it came from. The Quakers, principally.
Yes, yeah, so that's the kind of oldest style of investing in this way, the ethical style. And then as we move down the list, we kind of get into the newer territory of investments that are specifically focused on environmental impact. Positive impact is a relatively new development in the investment world, and it's where the money goes ultimately into companies that are finding solutions to the big global problems that we all face, and making money from doing so as well. Now, there are lots and lots of companies in the world. Many of the biggest have made money through fossil fuels. The companies that you tend to find in positive impact funds are smaller but higher growth, because they're investing in clean technology that's relatively new, and they're investing heavily in research and development, because these are new areas to invest in, so they can be more risky as well, but they're the kind of gold standard. If you want to know that your money is definitely not doing anything bad, as far as that is possible in a world where everything is fallible, then positive impact is where you would probably want to look. If you're less fussy and you just want to know that you're doing some good, more good than bad, then you can also look at ESG and sustainable labels, but you may be disappointed when you look under the bonnet of some of those funds that they're not as lovely and positive as you want them to be.
I was just going to add to that, Becky, that there's no one agreed consensus. So because I've been in the industry so long, I still talk about ethical just as a generic term, but more and more people are trying to make it tight what the consensus is, but there is no overall consensus. So don't worry too much about what label is on something. You could use the website SRI Services or ethical screening to find out a bit more about what you think you mean by these terms, to just explore what you feel comfortable with, and they will help you narrow that down. Further research.
Absolutely. It's really hard to avoid research in this area. You can delegate to a certain extent, but if you really mean business, you're going to want to have to do your own research and make sure that you feel comfortable with where your money is going. Which brings me to the checklist, and I'll quickly rattle through this because we're already over, but this is just a way to kind of think about where your money is going, because there's a lot of choice out there, even in this new, still fairly niche area. And this checklist it's a balance of thinking about your own needs and where your money is going. And I won't go through it all because we are over, but do take a look at it and just remember that it's there when you come to the click button for making your investment. Just make sure you've gone through this list.
Can I add to that really briefly? Sorry, I know we're out of time, but I would say, because there's so many new funds, a lot of people are just jumping on the bandwagon. So if a fund has only just been launched, it may be a little bit greenwashy, not necessarily, but something to be aware of. If the firm only has one ethical fund, then I would suggest it's more likely to be just a token, oh, we better do a bit of ESG, we'll have this fund. It might be tokenism. Have a look on the website to see if there's a full list of what the fund invests in, not just the top 10, but a full list of everything that's in the fund. And that level of transparency normally means that the company's taking it really seriously. So yeah, those are my other tips to add to Becky's.
I'm not sure if we probably don't have time to go through these, but there have been a number of investment apps launching recently with a focus in this area. Definitely worth a look, but don't overcommit and don't have loads of apps. Try and choose one, because your phone can get very confusing and you can forget where you've put money, frankly, with so many easy, convenient, low cost options available to you. And if we just have a quick look at the next slide, please do take a look at the Good Investment Review on Good with Money. It has lots of fund details, including their performance data, as well as ratings on the criteria that we've been talking about today, ethical and sustainable criteria. There are a few names there to look out for. This is by no means an exhaustive list of names, but it's just to say there are some very large, well-known providers like Aviva and some smaller ones. As Olivia said, just be mindful of the risk of each, and with the newer ones, they're untested as yet. So if you're a beginner investor, that may be uncomfortable for you. I bet we haven't got time for questions. Marie?
Yeah, I think, well, we've wrapped up the presentation, but if people are happy to stay on and you have a few more minutes, Olivia and Becky, to take a few more questions, that's fine by me. So,
is there any way of saving the chat? Because I'm aware that there are quite a few questions that we haven't been able to answer yet.
Yeah, we can definitely save the chat. Yeah, I'll do that.
We could maybe do a sort of Q&A document where we answer.
Yeah.
When it's very personal, again, as a financial advisor, I have to be very careful not to tell people what to do without proper knowledge of the client. So it will be hints rather than advice.
Yeah, I think there's a good one here, which is, you know, as a beginner, somebody hasn't really saved. Are these apps a good place to start? Any thoughts?
Yes, I think they are. They are a good place to start because you can keep checking in on your money really easily. I know Olivia would say this too, that there's a danger of over checking and over engaging, and that it can be worrying if you put £50 in and you see it's gone down to £40 2 weeks later. There's a danger of panic with the apps because you can get a bit obsessed. So if you feel you can invest using an app but without losing your composure, because you're investing for the long term, then go for it.
Yeah, okay, absolutely. And actually, if things fall in value, that's a good time to put more money in, because you're getting more units, yes, in the fund that you're buying, because the value of them has gone down. So then when things pick up again, you get an inflated growth. So again, it's buy low and sell high, but that actually goes against what most people feel comfortable doing, sadly.
And also sometimes you just get it wrong. I mean, I put some money in January and I'm watching my shares going down in value, but it's okay because it's that I know that, you know, I'm invested for 20 years, so I'm not too worried. Yes,
and trying to time the market is nigh on impossible, even for professionals, because if somebody says they know what's going to happen in the future and they're an investment professional, don't believe them, because they don't know. They might have a good guess, but beware of overconfidence in your advisors. Take it with a pinch of salt. I'm often asked what's going to happen, you know, and I say, I don't know. You know, we can talk about politics, we can talk about economics, etc., but don't actually know, and constantly being surprised by markets.
Especially this year, right? Who would have thought there'd be so much stock market growth during a global pandemic?
Yes,
madness.
Exactly. And the amount of times I said, oh, these are funny times. I've been saying that every year for 20 years. There's always something going on that seems remarkable and curious, and, you know, it's just life, I suppose, and global politics. And but are there any more questions you think we should answer, Marie? Oh, how
Let
can
me
I hire an
check.
advisor? Becky, do you want to?
Yeah,
Yes.
Unbiased.
Yeah.
Ethical
So
Investment Association.
financial advice can be expensive. It will depend on how much you have to invest and what service exactly you're after. There are resources. The Ethical Investment Association is a really good place to have a look for an advisor. There is a list on the Good With Money website of investment advisors that specialise in this area in particular. There's a range of men and women on that list. There's lots of women who can offer you qualified financial advice if you prefer to go to a female advisor.
Unbiased is
Unbiased is great. Now they have local searches, so you can search for somebody locally. It doesn't seem to matter so much now where somebody is based. And you can also select ethical only on the Unbiased website too. And yeah, I mean, interview a few people. You know, if you want a financial advisor who you want a relationship with for the rest of your life, you need to get on with them. So don't just go to the first person that you speak to, would be my advice, Olivia.
Yes.
If that's fair enough.
I think it is. And actually most of my clients, my best clients, are quite like me, I've realised. Of course, we're all sheep, aren't we, ultimately, and we're drawn to people a bit like us. With similar values, similar education, similar life experiences.
Yeah.
So, although they may be a very different age, we have something in common, which may be the ethical views, but
I think you know that there is a cost barrier to it. So a good time to do it is if you have inherited a lump sum, or you've got some, you know, a bonus, or you've got some specific life goal or issue that you really need help with. And it can be that comes later on in your working life, but there are also times earlier on in working life, particularly family planning, actually, I think is one time in life when people really could do with some guidance and advice, and they don't get it because they're too busy and there's too much else going on in the immediate term. But certainly, you know, if you've got a particular life thing goal in mind, it's good to go to somebody with that, something specific to talk about.
I've noticed Harriet's asked about property, and I actually did a blog recently. So if you have a look at our website, castlefield.com, in the news and media, and just search for property, I did an article on property versus investment, because we do get asked that a lot. I mean, ultimately, property can be really good, but all your eggs in one basket, and you can't do any tax planning because you can't break up the bits of property to use your capital gains tax and ISA allowances. You know, we've had a boom for 20 years. So people who, you know, lots of our parents, for example, who might have a second home or something and rental property as part of their retirement planning, it's worked brilliantly for them. Whether the picture will be the same, don't know. But again, you've got to go long term for property, really, I would suggest, and it's not flexible. And you have to be very careful where you buy, and you shouldn't, if you're renting a property out, don't go for a property that you want to live in. Be very hard-hearted about, no, I'm buying a rental property. Is it going to be easy to rent? Is it near public transport? Is it, you know, is it desirable for the right reasons? Not, oh, it's a really pretty apartment, and you know what I mean? You've got to be very clear about why you're buying it.
I think the tax implications of investing that you were talking about earlier, Olivia, are really important, and I would want to emphasise that at the moment, you know, the government is looking for ways to tax us more, and one way it's doing that is by keeping tax thresholds fixed. And that means that as you earn more, you invest more, your investments grow more, the chance of you having to pay tax, while it might not seem relevant to you now with smaller amounts of money, if you're just starting out, over time you can end up with quite big tax bills, and it can come as a nasty shock. And tax is really relevant, and I think lots of people don't realise that until it's too late and they've got a bill from HMRC.
Great. I think we're going to wrap it there, because we've run a bit over time, because there were lots of interesting questions, which is great. Thank you both, Olivia and Becky, for your time. Well, as Olivia suggested, we may go back to the question and see if we've missed any important ones and put that as a note. Olivia's kindly offered to do it, so here we go. Let's stay in touch. So you have everyone's details in there. If some of you are interested in our hackathon, check out the ccollective.com website. Ella, if you can put the URL there for everybody. We're taking registrations up until Tuesday, so be quick. And I mean, if anything else, I really want to thank you for making the time. I hope this has been informative, and you'll take something from it and start doing something about your finance, something more. And so we'll be sharing the recording with you via email. So watch out for an email from us, probably next week. And again, if you have any questions, stay in touch with us on email or in social channels for more information. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much for inviting me.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience, ladies. And thank you for all the ladies who are on their journey to investing for good. Okay. So bye, everyone.
Bye.
Enjoy the weekend, and